This is the PreAlgebra quiz review for lessons 3.1 through 3.3. The first couple of problems, they're asking us to write each fraction as a decimal. So to make this fraction into a decimal, or any fraction into a decimal, I take the numerator and I divide by the denominator. So I need to think about, well, 7 does not go into 1. So I need to add a decimal point and a 0, and I know that 7 goes into 10 once, and I need to continue dividing until my decimal point either ends, my decimal either ends or repeats. Now I have 7 into 30, which goes in 4 times. And then I'm going to need to keep going. So 7 into 20. So 7 into 20, which gives me it twice. And I ran out of room here, so I'm going to keep going. 20 minus 14 is 6. So I have 7 into 60, which gives me 8. And then I'm going to have to keep going. 7 into 40, which gives me 5. And then finally 7 into 50, which would be 7. And then I'm back to the beginning, 7 into 10. So 7 into 10 is going to continue to be a 1, and then we're going to continue to see this repeat. So all of these numbers will continue to repeat, so I need to put a line over top all of the repeating decimals. Next one, we're just going to again make this into a decimal, so 3 divided by 14. 14 into 30 goes twice. 14 into 20 is once. 14 into 60 goes 4 times. Which gives me 56. Again, I'm running out of room here. 14 into 40, but this is just long division. Goes twice. So what you'll see here is that if I get another 2, that ends up that 2, 1, and 4 are going to end up repeating, so I can stop once I realized that the decimal is repeating. Then the last one is also going to be a long one, and I'm going to do 1 divided by 13 here. So again, long division. If it does not go into the 10, I put a 0 and then add another 0. And 13 goes into 100 7 times. And then I'm going to keep going. Thirteen goes into 90 6 times. 13 goes into 120 9 times. 13 into 30 goes twice. keep going. So I have 30 minus 26. 13 into 40 is 3 times. And that'll get me back to 13 into 10. So I'm going to have 0.076923 as my answer. Ran out of room here. And since I'm going to start over again with another 0, because 13 goes into 10 0 times, I know that the next set is going to continue to repeat with these numbers. So this would be my answer. And I need to make sure it's negative if my answer started out as negative. Here we're comparing the two decimals, and they're both negative. So we take each decimal and we start with the same place value. So the tenths place value, we have a -5 and a -1. Which one is greater? Well, -1. So that means that we point our arrow towards the lower number and we open our arrow towards the higher number. So you would read this as -0.56 is less than -0.16. Here we need a common denominator to compare two fractions. So we can make it 63. And we get that 4/7 is the greater fraction. So we open that towards the greater fraction. The last one, we need to have them both in the same form, so we could put them both in decimal form, or we can put them both in fraction form. If we make them both fractions, we would need common denominators. So to make 6.65 a fraction, I go to the last digit, which is the hundredths place, and I put 65 over 100. Now I need to have them both as a same denominator, so I might as well just multiply them both by each other. So I have 2600 over 3100 compared to 2015 over 3100. So I can clearly see that 26 over 31 is the greater fraction. Here we need to write each decimal as a fraction or mixed number, so kind of like what I just said, we go to the last place value and we put the number over that place value, so 68 over 100, and then we simplify as much as possible. So 68 can go into 2, 100 goes, or 2 goes into 100 also, which becomes 50. We can still divide by 2 again, and we get 17 over 25, and that's as simplified as we can get it. Now with a repeating decimal, in this case it's a mixed number, I'm going to have 2 as my whole number, and then to get my fraction part, I normally would put this 7 over 10, but since it's a repeating 7, I do 1 less than the place value, so it should be 2 and 7 over 9. Here, this is another mixed number, so I have 4 as my whole number. My fraction comes from this last 5 being in the hundredths place, so 4 and 55 100ths. If we divide by 5, that gives us 11 over 20, and the 4 stays there, so 4 and 11 over 20 would be my answer. Here we need to figure out which set of numbers negative 2.25 belongs to. We have rational, we have integers, we have whole numbers, and natural numbers. Natural numbers are the most specific. They're more just like counting numbers, so 1, 2, 3, 4, they have to be positive. They don't include 0, so this is definitely not a natural number. Whole numbers also have to be positive, and they cannot be and it does include 0, but it does not include any negative numbers, so it can't be a whole. Integers do include negative numbers, but they do not include negative fractions or decimals, so it can't be an integer. So the only set this number belongs to is rational numbers, which include pretty much any number except for a number that doesn't end, so a decimal that does not end. Here we're multiplying, so we need to multiply the numerators, and we get 1 times -4 or -4. Multiply the denominators, 3 times 5, which is 15. Notice I only use the negative sign once because it does only apply to the -4/5. So my answer is going to be negative. I can simplify this. So here we can't simplify this anymore because 4 and 15 don't have any numbers together, so my answer is going to be -4/15. And it's negative because when you're multiplying one negative by one positive, your answer is always negative. Here we have two positives, and we can also cross simplify. If the numbers go into each other diagonally, you can simplify them before you multiply. So 3 goes into 3, obviously 3 times, so they both become 1s. 2 does not go into 5, so we cannot simplify those. But once we simplify, we multiply our numerators and our denominators, and this is our final answer. Here we have one that is in mixed number form and one that is in fraction form, so I need to change my mixed number into a fraction first. I do that by multiplying my whole number times the denominator, so 2 times 8 is 16. Add the numerator, which is 21, and that makes this -21/8. Now we can look to see if we can cross simplify, which we cannot, so we're just going to multiply our numerators and our denominators, and we get 63/88, and we can't simplify anymore. Notice that this is positive because we have two negatives. When we're multiplying two negatives, the answer is positive. Here we both have them in mixed number form, so we need to make them improper before we start. So 1 times 6 is 6, plus 1 is 7. Notice I do not apply the negative when I'm doing that process. I only put it at the end here, so it's -7/6. Then I do 3 times 9 is 27 plus 2, which is 29/9. I can't cross simplify before I multiply, so I'm just going to multiply the 7 times the 29 to get 203, and 6 times 9, which gives us 54. And we can leave this in improper form, but my answer is also going to be negative because I had one negative and one positive. Here we can simplify before we multiply, cross simplify. 7 goes into 35 5 times, and then I can divide 4 by 2 and 50 by 2. So we can simplify a little before we multiply. So 2 times 1 gives us 2, and 5 times 25 is 125, and that is as simplified as I can get it. Here again we have two mixed numbers. We need to change them into improper first. So 4 times 7 is 28, plus 5 is 33, times 3 times 10 is 30, plus 7 is 37. We can't we can't cross simplify, so we need to just multiply 33 times 37, which gives us 1,221/70. And that is all we can do. The last couple of problems, we're going to put the values of these variables into the problem and then multiply. It says to evaluate each expression. It gives us A, B, and C, and then write the product in simplest form. So we need to make our fractions in simplest form at the end. So the first one is -AB. So A is 3/5, B is -5/7. So we have -3/5 times 5/7. And that's actually going to give us a positive answer because we have two negatives that we're multiplying by. We can cross simplify the 5's. 5 goes into 5 one time. So we have 3 times 1, which is 3, 1 times 7, which is 7, and that gives us our final answer. And again, that's positive because we had a negative times a negative. Here we have BC, which is B times C. That's negative 5/7 times 2 and 5/6. So we need to get 2 and 5/6 as an improper fraction. So that's 12/17 over 6. Can't simplify before we multiply, so we're just going to multiply our numerators times our denominators. That gives us 85 over 42. That's going to be a negative because we had one negative and one positive. That's as much as we can simplify it. Here is 2 and 1/11 times A times B times C. So I'm going to make the 2 and 1/11 into an improper fraction first, which is 23/11, and then plug in my values for A, B, and C. So 3/5, negative 5/7, and 2 and 5/6. 3/5, negative 5/7, and 2 and 5/6. So all of these are multiplied by each other. We also need to change the 2 and 5/6 into improper. So we have 23/11 times 3/5 times negative 5/7 times 17 over 6. I'm going to take this problem two fractions at a time because we can't simplify them all at the same time. So if we look at the first two fractions, we can't simplify those. The next two fractions, we can cross simplify the 5's because 5 goes into 5 one time, and then we can't simplify anything else. So now that we've cross simplified everything we can just multiply all the numerators together. I need to keep in mind that my answer is going to be negative because I only have one negative out of all of these four fractions, so that makes my answer negative. So negative 1173 divided by 462, and that's as simplified as I can get it. The last one, we are doing negative 4 times C, which C was 2 and 5/6. So again, we need to make 2 and 5/6 into improper. If I make a fraction as a whole number, a fraction out of the 4, I would put it over 1. So 4 over 1 times 17 over 6. And I can simplify the 4 and the 6 divide by 2. And then I multiply negative 2 times 17, which is 34, negative, over 1 times 3, which is 3. And that's as simplified as I can get it. And that concludes our Quiz 1 review. You will see problems like every problem that I showed you. Just be careful with the negatives and be careful with simplifying, particularly.